Monsieur Germain is a school teacher who has returned to work after the summer vacation. This year he will be the 8th grade classroom teacher. A pedagogical council was held at which the school principal spoke about the changes in the policy within the lyceum. Starting this year, school uniforms will be reintroduced for students so that the rich and the poor do not stand out from each other. Everyone applauds, but Germain doesn't think it will change anything. At the lyceum, the first day of school began. Later at home, Germain was checking the students' essays. He told his wife Jan that he had never had a worse class than this. All the students are stupid as can be. Germain wants to instill a love of literature in his students, but with each time he becomes more convinced that they are hopeless. However, an essay by a student named Claude Garcia stood out from the rest not only in writing style but also in content. Claude wrote about how he loves to watch his neighbors. He watched them from afar for a long time until he finally ended up in their house under the pretext of helping the classmate with trigonometry tasks. Claude wanted to uncover the secret of this house and these people. At the end of his essay, he wrote that there would be a continuation. Of course, Germain was stunned. The next day in class, he reminded the students that a new essay was due soon, so they should prepare. After the lesson, Germain asked Claude to stay behind, saying that his essay was unethical. According to the teacher, it's not right to invade other people's privacy and even more so to mock them. But Claude clearly feels no remorse. Germain was surprised when the student decided to submit a new essay ahead of time. Claude wrote about how he again offered Rafa to study trigonometry. Claude wonders why he chose this unremarkable guy. Rafa's parents often meet him after school. The boy didn't seem at all embarrassed by this. One day Claude wondered what the home of such a normal family might be like. Jan owns a gallery, but her business is failing. She urgently needs to find buyers for the paintings, otherwise the investors will close the gallery. Germain told his wife about Claude's new essay. He is concerned about the boy's obsession with his neighbors. Jan read the essay. Claude wrote about how he ended up in Rafa's house for the second time. They were greeted by Esther, Rafa's mother. Claude couldn't take his eyes off her. In the end, he again wrote that there would be a continuation. Jan believes that Germain should speak with Claude's parents. In her opinion, the boy needs a psychologist, but Germain is confident that there are no reasons for concern. The next day, Germain asked his colleague to show him Claude Garcia's personal file. It turned out that he has no mother, and his father is unemployed due to a work-related injury. The family moved frequently. Germain gave Claude several books from his personal library. Claude in turn gave him a new essay. The boy writes about how he continued to study math with Rafa. One day they were interrupted by Rafa's father, Monsieur Ardol. He is also called Rafa. It seemed that one could only dream of such a father. Claude carefully observes the normal family, wanting to learn the dark secrets of each of them. Claude's essay is written in the present tense. According to the boy, this allows him to stay in the house even after some time. Before leaving, Claude asked the teacher why he was helping him. Germain doesn't like to give compliments, but he admitted that the student writes quite well. At home, Germain told the wife about his plans to develop Claude's writing talent. In the new essay, Claude wrote about how Rafa Sr. offered to watch a match with him. Soon Esther joins them, though she is not interested at all. The woman is looking at a magazine with the house of her dreams, which the family will never be able to afford. Then Rafa Sr. is called to work. To be continued. In Jan's opinion, Claude's essay is filled with sarcasm and contempt for these people. He considers them middle class. Germain gave the student new books to expand his literary horizons. Jan has 3 weeks left until the exhibition, and she has no idea how to attract customers. The husband suggested she read the new essay. Claude writes about how he explored the house of the normal family. The boy overheard Rafa Sr. complaining to the wife that his boss doesn't appreciate him. Rafa Sr. wants to start his own business, but that requires investment. Esther is upset because this means that the renovation in the house will have to be postponed. Suddenly she noticed Claude, who pretended to be looking at the paintings on the wall. Later, Claude overheard Esther telling her husband that she didn't want this strange boy to come to their house anymore. To be continued. Reading this, Jan had contradictory feelings. The next day, Germain told Claude that his essay lacked conflict. The teacher is convinced that everything the student wrote is just a fiction. Claude admitted that he probably won't be able to write anymore. There's a math test coming up, and it's highly likely that Rafa will fail it. In that case, his parents will find him a tutor, and Claude will no longer be allowed in the house. Germain realized that Claude wanted him to steal the test answers. The teacher was outraged by such audacity, but during the break he still spoke with the math teacher. He found it strange that Germain was interested in math. When all his colleagues left, Germain stole the test answers and made copies. Claude in turn passed the answers to Rafa. When the son got the highest score for the test, Rafa Sr. was as stunned as Esther. It seemed that the family didn't mind Claude being in their house, because it was thanks to him that their son started studying better. Rafa guessed that his friend got the test answers from Monsieur Germain. Rafa finds the teacher strange and advises Claude to be more careful with him. Jan can't believe that her husband stole the answers. In her opinion, the student is manipulating him. Germain promised that it would not happen again. Claude watches as Rafa Sr. and his son go off to play basketball. At that moment Claude rang the doorbell, lying that he had forgotten his textbook here yesterday. Claude was finally alone with Esther. This was a woman who was incredibly bored. Claude told about his mother, who abandoned him when he was 9. Of course, Esther immediately sympathized with the boy and told about her dream of becoming a designer. But due to the birth of her son, she had to drop out of university. To be continued. Reading the essay, Jan thinks that all this will end badly, but Germain is convinced that most of these stories are just the boy's imagination. When Esther and Rafa Sr. were not at home, Claude explored their house while his classmate was solving math tasks. Claude rummaged in the couple's bedroom and found Esther's X-ray, as well as other things. Claude thinks about Esther, applying her husband's cologne to himself. Esther unexpectedly returned. Claude hid, watching her. Soon her husband arrived, who told the wife about his failures at work. To be continued. Jan believes that Esther is unhappy in her marriage. Also, Jan is convinced that deep down, Claude is not interested in the whole family, but only in Esther. He wants to unravel her secret. Germain spoke with the student about his composition and asked what his ultimate goal was. Claude said that the main goal of his character is to get closer to Esther, but her husband and son get in his way. It is also important that all actions take place strictly in their home. Jan presented the paintings to investors. It was unclear how interested they were in this. Claude writes about how the family invited him to have dinner with them. After a while, Rafa Sr. went out to smoke. Claude also went outside and started a conversation with Rafa Sr. Germain believes that Claude befriended Rafa Sr., subconsciously wanting to take the place of his son and become part of the normal family. Also, according to the teacher, Claude needs to develop the image of Rafa Jr. As a character, he lacks any conflict. Despite wanting to be with Esther, Claude decided to play basketball with a classmate and his father to get to know them better. Now the actions have gone beyond the confines of the house. Germain believes that Claude has lost the thread of his narrative and still has not developed Rafa Jr. as a character. Claude always sits at the last desk. As a homework assignment, students had to write a composition about their best friend. Germain asked Rafa to come to the board and read his essay aloud. Of course, Rafa wrote about Claude. The other students began to mock him. Rafa felt humiliated and blamed the teacher, who had made him a laughingstock in front of the whole class. Claude, who hears Germain's voice in his head, advised the friend to write about this incident in the school newspaper. This is exactly what will help him uncover the image of Rafa. Germain was aware of Rafa's plan, so he asked him to stay after class and gave him a book. But this did not make Rafa change his mind about taking revenge on the teacher, and soon the article appeared in the school newspaper. Rafa wrote about how Monsieur Germain humiliated him in front of the whole class. Judging by the writing style, the author of the article was actually Claude. The school principal reprimanded Germain for his action. Germain claimed that he merely pointed out the students' mistakes. Monsieur Artol wished to meet with the teacher in person to talk about the incident. The man was furious and demanded a public apology. The official opening of Jan's gallery took place. The Artol spouses also visited the exhibition. Seeing them, Claude hurried to leave. When Jan returned home, she looked very upset. It turns out the main investors did not come to the exhibition, which means that the gallery is likely to be closed and sold. Jan admitted that it was she who invited the Artols. The woman really wanted to see these characters in person. For the first time, Claude stayed overnight at Rafa's house. That evening the classmate confessed his feelings to him. It turns out that Rafa considers him more than just a friend. Claude couldn't sleep for a long time and went to explore the house. Germain thought this moment was strong but implausible, but Claude assured him that it was true. In this way he wanted to reveal the image of Rafa. That night, Claude entered the marital bedroom and watched Rafa Sr. and Esther. He knows that Esther is unhappy with her husband. Jan dislikes Germain's obsession with Claude. She thinks they started this game for nothing. Meanwhile, Claude writes about how he sits with Esther on the porch and talks to her about simple things. The woman has a backache, but Claude had guessed about this long before her words. He bit into the apple that Esther had previously eaten. Germain didn't like this symbolism, as in cheap novels. Claude continues to spy. The couple argues more and more often. Claude realized that this was his chance and handed Esther a note. Esther was touched by the fact that the boy wrote poetry for her. The woman turned out to be not as simple as he thought before. Germain considers this an unfair game and tries to interfere in the world created by Claude. When Rafa Jr. saw his mother and best friend together, he ran away in tears. Esther fell asleep on the couch while Claude watched her. Suddenly a strange sound came from the second floor. Entering the room, Claude saw that Rafa had voluntarily left life. Reading this, Germain was very disturbed. The next day Rafa did not come to school. This made Germain worry even more. He asked the colleague to call the boy's parents. It turned out the boy just had a cold. Germain let all his students go earlier than usual, asking Claude to stay. In the teacher's opinion, Claude had gone too far, but the student said that he could not stop now. Germain refused to read the revised ending of the work. Angered, Claude crumpled and threw out the sheet, then left. Germain read the essay after all. Rafa Sr. came home and confessed to the wife that he had burned his boss's car. Crying, the man said that he was tired of such a life. Esther also had news for her husband. She said she was pregnant. Rafa in turn asked the parents to find him a math tutor because he no longer wanted to see Claude. It seems that the life of the normal family has returned to its usual course. Claude said that he had dreamed of entering this house for a whole year. His dream came true, but now there is no place for him in this house. To be continued. Seeing Claude on the basketball court, Germain immediately understood what had happened here. The guys fought over Esther. Germain believes that a happy reunion of the family in this case is impossible, so Claude should rewrite the ending. But Claude said that from now on he is only interested in mathematics, because it will not deceive. Claude watches Esther from a distance. Noticing the boy, the woman approached him and returned his poems. Claude offers Esther to run away together, but she asked him to forget about everything that happened. In the woman's opinion, Claude loves not her but the image in his head. Also Esther told that she, her husband and son are planning to move to start a new life. Claude watches as Esther leaves. Despite everything, he is going to find the end of his novel. Meanwhile at school, the lesson was interrupted by the school principal, asking Germain and Rafa to come to his office. Claude comes to Jan, who immediately recognized him. He asked for permission to come in. Jan felt confused, but did not object. Germain returned home angry and upset. Jan gave him the last page of the novel. Claude writes about how he ended up in his teacher's house under the pretext of returning books. Jan showed him a book written by Germain 20 years ago. It was a banal love story. Jan offered Claude to have lunch together. Suddenly the woman said that Esther would never leave her husband, especially since they will soon have a second child. Jan and Germain have no children. Claude realized that this upsets the woman. Suddenly there was a phone call. Jan found out that Germain was fired because Rafa told the school principal about the math test scam. Ever since Claude met Germain, he wanted to know everything about him. Germain was the main character of his story. Jan is packing her things, telling the husband that she is filing for divorce. Suspecting his wife of infidelity, Germain was furious. After some time, Claude and Germain met again. Germain, who had lost his job and wife, did not look his best. Claude admitted that he could not find the end of his novel. But he read Germain's book. The man wanted to throw it away, but Claude on the contrary liked the book. Germain and Claude are guessing who the people from the house across the street are. Their story depends only on the imagination of the observers. Claude said that there's always a way to enter any house and learn the story. Perhaps that's where they'll find what they're looking for. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.